Welcome to MUBUTV's Insider Podcast, where our mission is to educate, empower, and engage artists and music business professionals who are dedicated to having a successful career in the new music industry. Here are your hosts, Ritch, Esra, and Eric Knight. Welcome, Insiders, to the debut episode of the MUBUTV Insider Podcast. My name is Ritch Esra.
And I'm Eric Knight.
And we are going to be your guides and co-hosts for this wonderful journey that we're about to embark on. What MUBUTV Insider Podcast is all about is providing you with a deep dive about your music business career. Our purpose here, if we have to sum it up in a phrase, is we want to take education out of the classroom. And what do we mean by that? Today, the music business has gone through a radical revolution, a complete transformation from what it was just a decade ago. And what that requires of you, the recording artist, is a lot more information, a lot more commitment, a lot more knowledge that you need to have if music is to be your career. So what we're doing here is we're going to be providing you with a blueprint, so to speak. As I said, we're going to be going on a deep dive. We have lots of great interviews for MUBUTV Insider Podcast. We also have a whole video series where we're going to be taking you on the front lines and introducing you to people who are in various areas of the music business.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think one of the great things that one of our goals with MUBUTV, especially with the podcast and with the video series on YouTube, is that, one of our missions is trying to, build a self-sustaining career at this time. We feel like you don't need a record label. You don't need this. We're seeing so many acts and artists that are having these self-sustaining careers. And I think you'll agree with me, Rich. That's one of our big missions, is to try to not only taking education out of the classroom, but trying to get artists that can build self-sustaining careers and go out there and support themselves and be able to make a career out of this, a full-time career out of this.
Absolutely. And the thing is, Eric, I don't think that's ever been more achievable today and more challenging than ever before. And I think that, like we always say, artists have more power in their hands today than at any other point in their career because of what you said. We don't need a record label.
Right.
You don't need, somebody saying, you have permission to make music. We can do that on our own. You can build a career that's sustainable on your own, but you do have to have the knowledge. And that's where I think something like MUBUTV really can be helpful, is in educating you about what is necessary to do that. And the reason it sounds simple, but just to give a brief history, in the past, there were systems in place. There were labels and agencies and managers that had all these systems to provide to artists to get a career going. Well, none of those systems exist anymore. Right. And that's something that I think is very, very important. Also, there were very, 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 very few artists that actually got that opportunity.
Exactly.
And the few that got the opportunity, only 10 to 12% of them ever had careers.
Right.
Okay. Today, that number of people, doing music as a career,
the playing field has been leveled quite a bit.
It's been completely leveled. It's much more challenging to do it today, but at the same time, the opportunities to do it independently, and we see many, many examples of this out there in the world today, are there. And that's what we want to be able to provide to our listeners and to the insiders.
That's definitely one of our long-term goals is about educating people to build their careers. But also, we know that there's some of you out there that are pursuing record labels and trying to get those record deals and stuff. And that's kind of the beauty of this show, is that we're bringing it from both perspectives. We're bringing guests that are people that are in the major label system, and they're giving advice on how to get signed in this day and age today and how to get people's attention, which is one of the things that we always talk about.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's one of the things that's great about us, is that, we're definitely catering to the people that are trying to build a career on their own, but also if there's people that are out there that are trying to pursue a career with getting a record deal and trying to do it the old fashioned way, we also have that as well too.
Oh, I agree with you, but I think that for people that want that, they need to know the path to that. They need to know what's required to achieve that, because that's radically different than it was 5-10 years ago.
Absolutely.
In terms of going to a record label, getting a deal, getting signed, what is required from the label
right
today, and what they require from you financially and commitment wise
absolutely
is totally different than it was in the past.
And that's the great thing about the show, is that we're going to have people that we're going to be asking them those direct questions about how does an artist pursue a label in this, you know, era that we're in now. I think also too, we should take a little bit of time to kind of introduce who the hell we are actually, Rich. Go ahead, Rich.
Okay, well, I've been in the music business. I guess I'm in my 44th or 45th year this year. 45 years. I started in 1978 working for a trade publication called Record World. I've worked in radio promotion at labels at A&M. I've worked in A&R at Arista. I worked for Clive Davis, and I have been in the music industry. I now run a company for the last 30 years called the Music Business Registry. We publish all of the leading contact directories in A&R, in music publishing, in artist managers, in music attorneys, and in film and television music supervisors. All of the contact information, we publish those directories today. So in addition, I've also been an educator. I teach courses on the music business at Musicians Institute. I've taught at UCLA. I've taught at USC. I've taught at Trebas Institute. I've also taught at
SAE, I believe.
SAE,
right,
yes, exactly.
Right.
There's the School for Audio Engineering, absolutely. And I've done that as well. So, this is a natural extension for me. That's just a sort of a brief background on myself.
Yeah, and as for me, this is Eric Knight, and I've been kind of like a professional musician now for the past 20 plus years now, and I've been performing in bands, touring bands. I've been on tours, had record deals, and I come. I think one of the beautiful thing about you and I, Rich, is like we're always joking with each other that we're each other's yin and yang.
Right.
That you come from that system of the old model, and you've transformed yourself into this new model that's radically changed in the last 10, 15 years, and I come from that perspective of the independent musician that's been, kind of wearing jack of all trades and master of them all, doing publicity and trying to, figure out and navigate all those waters. So I think that really, kind of is a great balance with what I think what we're going to bring to the table for our listeners.
I totally agree. I think that there's, and that's the thing is that, I think for you listeners out there, for you insiders, and we call you insiders because, we call, that's the name of
we want to bring you on the inside of
exactly of what it takes, is that, one of the things that drew me to Eric was the fact that as an artist, he was so educated. He had taken the time to really educate himself. And that's an important point that I want to make here for you out there who are looking to build careers for yourself. If you're looking to do that, there's a path. And, and we're speaking to, like Eric mentioned before, we're speaking to those who are committed to this as a career. Now, let me say that, music is a hobby. There's nothing wrong with that. Music can be a wonderful hobby, meaning that, you play a little and you're interested in, maybe performing once or twice a year and, for friends and family, but it's not your career. But for those of you out there who are serious about this, who want to make a commitment to this as a career, as a way of life, then just know it's got to be exactly that. It's got to be a way of life. It's not something that, I'll give this a year, and if it doesn't work out, well, I'll go drive a truck. That's very, very important, especially today where so much of that burden, so much of that.
Well, the control has been put in their hands.
Exactly.
Now you have total control of your career now. Before there was gatekeepers. Now, what's the saying that you always say? The good news is
there's no more gatekeepers.
Right.
The bad news, there's no more gates. And what that means is that they've all been plowed down. And here's the thing about that is that, nobody can tell you can't make music. So in a world, and we do all live in a world where we can all get whatever music we want, whenever we want, however we want, on any number of devices we want, on any number of platforms we want, anywhere in the world, and we can pretty much do it for free. So that's the given. That's the landscape that we are in today. So our question to you then is this: in that kind of a world where you can get any music you want, what becomes most valuable in that world? And I'll give you a hint. It's not money. It's not power. It's not market share. It's something profoundly fundamental. It's the ability to get someone's attention. And why is that important to you? It's important because that's going to be the key element of building and sustaining a career, is getting the audience's attention. Trust me when we say, and you will have this reiterated over and over, it's the hardest thing to do. And by the way, money or size or market share doesn't help that. Do you think it's easy for Disney to market their latest Pixar movie, which went into the toilet? No, it's not. Do you think it's easy for Universal or for Sony? No, it's not. You, meaning, we, the culture, we now control what is successful. It used to be, well, how big do we need to write the check? And that will guarantee a certain level of success. We no longer live in that world. We no longer live in that world in music. We certainly don't live in that world insofar as television. I grew up in a world where we had 3 channels. Now we live in a world where we have 30,000 channels. Right. So getting attention and sustaining it, that's the key element for you artists out there. Building an audience, and asking yourself, do you have that knowledge? First of all, you have to start out with the question of, who is my audience?
Right.
Do you know who your audience is? And if the answer is no, then the next question has to be, what am I doing to learn who my audience is?
Exactly. And that's one of the things that we're going to be providing and talking about is that, and how to find out how to target your audience. I want to kind of just take a step back too. One of the other parts of our audience, obviously, I think the core of our audience is going to be, musicians, songwriters, artists, bands that are doing this day in, day out. I think one of the other things that we want to definitely express, you and I, Ritch, that we talked about is we're also, part of the show is also dedicated to people that are actually trying to pursue a career in the business, whether you want to become a manager, A&R person, music publisher, tour manager, etc. You can kind of add to that as far as that's part of our audience as far as, as well as who we're going to be trying to educate.
Sure. Future, I guess what you would call industry professionals.
Right, the future of the music industry.
Future of the industry. And they're out there.
Exactly.
I see these people everywhere, every day.
Yep.
I see them in the city.
Classroom and
I see them in the classroom, and I see them online.
Right.
I see them on podcasts. I listen to them. I see them on video interviews. Young people who are interested in this business. If this is your calling, for you out there who are listening to this and you want to be in the music business as a music industry professional, I'm not talking to artists right now, I'm talking to people who want to be music business professionals. It has to start with educating yourself. You have to become aware of what this business is about. And it has never been easier to do that than today. There are more sources of information, free information, that all you need to do is sign up for. It will come to you.
Right.
But you do need to commit yourself to reading it. This is, I think, one of the most important things if you want to be part of this business. It's not a closed, isolated business anymore. There are leading managers of major acts that are operating, without offices, without infrastructure, and they're doing it because they have the knowledge and the know-how. It's not just street smarts anymore. That helps. But you really do need to know what you're talking about. You need to know what points that we're making about artists, about who their audience is, about how to reach that audience.
You have to learn every part of this industry now.
That's right.
You have to become literally a jack of all trades and master of them all.
That's right. You absolutely do, especially today. And I'll say, Eric, that's never been easier to achieve than today.
Right.
Because the sources of information to do that are open to you, are there.
But it definitely takes a
available.
Special individual that really wants to learn. And that's the whole idea that we're really drilling home here, is that it's a lot of hard work. This is like any other industry in the world, whether you're selling widgets or selling soap, it's the same thing. This is the music business and the music industry. So as such, you just have to really, really be educated.
I totally agree. And I think that this is something that, our guests, we over the next, period of time that you join us, we will always have a guest with us, and you will hear that point that you just made re-emphasized again and again, that it's about that commitment, as a manager, as a publicist, as a publisher, as an artist,
right,
to committing to learning what it takes to do this, if it's to be your career.
Absolutely. And we're really excited too, because some of the guests, Ritch, we've got, I think, our opening episodes with Don Passman on the podcast.
The leading music business attorney.
The guy who basically wrote the Music Business Bible. So we're really excited after you guys listen to this episode to go to our first episode with Don. He really shared some great, knowledge and wisdom. We've got some legendary people such as, John Kolodner.
Legendary A&R guy from Geffen and Atlantic. Absolutely.
Mike Klink, the guy behind, Guns N' Roses' huge success. We've got famous, artist Rudy Sarzo which was a fabulous episode about, touring and being, kind of this, what's the word that we always talk about with Rudy's career? He's kind of like I don't want to say a vanguard, but just, a man of the road and, talking about.
He's a lifer. He's
right,
what you call a lifer.
Right.
Those people who have just done this their whole life. And that was such a fascinating episode where I learned at that level, at the top levels of the Ozzy Osbournes, touring at that level, the Whitesnakes, the Quiet Riots, that even touring at that level, the kinds of things that those people look for. And it's not necessarily the same things that you would normally think, the great player. Exactly. That's the given. That's the baseline. But trust. Can I rely on this person?
Right.
What are they like to be with for the next 3 months?
Exactly.
That, a lesser talent who has those qualities is going to get the job over the prima donna moron,
right.
Who just can play better. That was really educational.
Some of the other guests that we've got are people that are like really, on the cutting edge. Amber Horsberg, which is a great,
brilliant one on marketing. That's one you do not want to miss.
Yeah, and some of the other people, Kenny Salcido, Red Bull Records A&R. I mean, it's on and on. We're just so excited to share these episodes with you because we think you're going to get, really great value. And I think one of the other things we wanted to talk about too was, the podcast versus the video series. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're probably a podcast lover and are listening to this right now, either on Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast from. But, we also have the video side of what we do too,
Absolutely.
Which is on YouTube, which you could visit at youtube.com/MUBUTV and definitely subscribe, where we have also guests that we interview as well. That are some that are a little bit different from the podcast that we've interviewed. A couple of them that have been the same, but tell us a little bit about that, Rich, about that format of the show.
Well, that's a totally different format. I think the main difference is that when we look at the video side, those are much more condensed kinds of interviews, 15, 20 minutes on some of them, whereas the podcasts, this format of podcast and
it's a deeper dive.
It's a much deeper dive where you can really go into the minutia and the essence of something, which we don't necessarily do on the video side of it. We get much more of the nitty gritty and the specific focus. So those are the two main elements, and I think they're both necessary. And as Eric said, we don't have, there is a difference. As he said, some of you are podcast people. Some of you are going to be video people.
And some of you are both. I think a lot of the people are probably both. Like
yes.
I consume podcasts as well as video. So I'm sure a lot of the listeners or our insiders out there that are listening to this are probably, fans of watching the videos. We really encourage everybody to go to watch the videos as well on YouTube because we think those are great. If you're a visual person too, you really, I think, get a great insight into how these guys think and why they make the decisions that they do.
Absolutely. And we don't have much overlap.
Right.
I mean, there's a few. I think there's like maybe
had a
2
couple,
or 3 that overlap, but the rest of them
are completely different from our podcast series.
Completely different, and they focus on different areas of the business. You're going to hear from A&R people, from managers,
music supervisors.
You're going to hear from lawyers. You're going to hear from publicists.
Yeah.
You're going to hear from publishers.
Yeah.
And if these things or these terms that we're talking about don't make sense or you don't know what they mean, tune in so you can learn exactly what those things are.
Yeah. So check that out at youtube.com/MUBUTV and don't forget to hit the notification bell, and also visit our website too at MUBUTV.com, where you're going to get profiles, all of our guest insiders. And also, if you're listening to this on the podcast and you like to listen or read over transcripts and show notes, we have transcripts and show notes that'll be available each and every week of every episode. So, again, we hope you're tuned in. I want to kind of switch gears and talk a little bit about one of the really other important missions that we have with MUBUTV, which was what you and I talked about that we felt that was really important, was that whole idea of the holistic approach. Because
absolutely,
I definitely don't think it's about just, trying to get a deal or just trying to build a career for yourself. There's so many other elements when you think about this from I guess a 50,000 foot view,
yes,
which is, talking about your mental health, your financial health and well-being, spiritual mindset, how to physical well-being. I mean, these are all topics that obviously, have becoming more and more into the forefront, but we really, I think even with some of our guests, Greg Richling, for instance, one of the other guests that we'll have, which was one of the bass player for the Wallflowers, he talked about that whole idea about mental health and kind of that well-being and trying to stay sane on the road. But maybe, elaborate on that a little bit, Rich.
Absolutely. And what I realized is that when he discussed that, what was so interesting about it was the fact that that was in an era when that was just expected. Mental health wasn't discussed.
Right.
But we've all seen the casualties from that era, whether it be drug abuse or suicides or whatever. And mental health, the whole element of mental health and the whole person as an artist, I think, is something that we are really looking at in a very significant way, where, tours that go on in 18 months
are
that
takes
really
a toll. That takes a toll mentally.
It takes a complete toll. And we can look back and say, even at the big superstar level, Justin Bieber did a tour a couple years back where 154 dates. He made it through 140 before he just
it collapsed.
It didn't work anymore. Or Kanye West. I mean, these are people that, are perfect illustrations of why mental health is such an important element to be taken care of. Not only mental health, but spiritual health. The premise of, how you choose to live your life, your physical well-being. What can you do to take care of yourself?
Financially speaking, coming from this from a financial strength as opposed to a weakness, not being in debt. I mean, we are going to be exploring really different guests too. It's not going to only be music business oriented people. We're going to be speaking with psychologists and psychiatrists, people from the financial space, how to organize your life. As you know, I mean, I'm a musician, a professional musician. I'm very scatterbrained, and I know a lot of you out there are. We're going to talk about how to organize your life and really, really be able to be focused all the way around to give yourself the best shot you can to have a successful career in the industry.
Absolutely. And I think that, looking at this from a perspective of the whole person rather than just the artist or just the person who's expected to deliver, which is what, most people in the music business think about, what was your last hit? What was your last tour? Keep going.
Right.
Well, how do you keep going?
Yeah,
sometimes mentally, how do you keep going? Where does family fit in? What about a support system in your life? Do you even have one? Do you even know what that is?
And one of the things that we forgot to mention was about the team, how important it is to put together your team.
And we're going to talk about that. We have a lot of episodes that focus on the relevance and the importance of team, especially as your career builds. Nobody does this alone.
Exactly.
It's funny. I just finished over the last couple nights watching that 4-hour documentary on Madoff. Bernie Madoff on Netflix. It's quite good. And one of the things that they talk about is that very thing, that it wasn't just Madoff. You cannot pull off a $69 billion Ponzi scheme alone. Right. It's impossible. Certainly not in the world and in the fashion that he did that. Right. And the team that helped him do that and how they identified each of those people. Same thing in your own career. When do you need a manager? What is a manager? When do you need an agent? What role do they have? A publicist,
a collaborator with songwriting.
Exactly. And what do you want from those things? Right. What do you need from a collaborator? And there's no one generic answer for those questions.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that I think is so interesting about that. And we're going to be looking at that, about, team and what does that mean? And even team within a band.
Right. Exactly.
And I know you can speak to that big
how to
time.
Keeping that dynamic and, assigning roles to everybody and find out what everybody's strengths and weaknesses are, doing that SWOT analysis of, who is good at doing publicity in the band, who is good at, booking, and just trying to split up the duties to try to get that to a successful level. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Like you said, I don't think there's one path to it. Every path is different with each person. It's a very unique and interesting thing. What are some of the long-term goals, Rich, that you think with Mubu TV, with what we're planning?
Well, I think, as I said, I think one of the main long-term goals is that we want to take the whole education process out of the classroom. This has been information that's only been available to, in universities. I mean, I taught at UCLA and USC. see and taught these classes, and they're very expensive. So one of the goals is to take education out of the classroom. One of the other goals, I think, for our listeners and for our insiders is to be able to show you the value of learning this stuff, because if you don't, I don't think you can have a career. I don't think so many artists hold this notion that it's just going to happen for me because I'm talented.
Exactly.
And that's not true today.
It's the furthest thing from the truth.
It's the furthest thing.
It never was like that, I don't ever think, but now more than ever.
So that's one of the other goals. And to be able to provide people with roadmaps, with actual concrete examples.
Step by step.
Exactly, because it is possible. As we stated earlier, again, one of the other goals in terms of educating our audience and our insiders is the fact that today, more than ever, more than any other time that I can remember in my 45-year career, the artist has more power
than in any other time
to have a career. No one can tell you, you can't make music and put it out there. There was a time when technology didn't allow for that. You were with a record label or you didn't have a career. End of story. Right. End of the sentence. That's it. And we don't live in that era anymore. Now it's about, how do I bring attention to what I'm doing? Right. I make music. What is the stat lately where, Daniel Ek of Spotify announced 100,000 songs a day.
And a few years ago, that was 30,000
exactly
a day, and on the DSP. So it's unbelievable, the volume, and that's the juxtaposition and the dichotomy that we're living in. Now anybody can be a musician, but that's the problem. Like you said, with the gates going down, and now that there's no more gates, everybody can make music. But we all know there's a lot of crap that's being put out there. So to try to dig through the weeds and even the things that are happening now, as of this recording. We talked about the TikTok thing, the TikTok phenomenon, and how that's
transforming,
kind of, right? And the labels now are just lost. They're pulling their hairs out, trying to figure out, how do we promote any of our artists, try to make any kind of headway. Again, because of trying to get people's attention.
Yes, it's becoming much, much more difficult. And, and I see parallels. It's funny, we're talking about this in the music business, but I see parallels in a lot of other areas of media. I see parallels in the movie business. We were talking about this a little while ago, where the exhibition aspect of the movie business, going to a theater, where you're going to spend the time to get your butt to that theater at 7:00 to buy those tickets, sit down and watch that movie for the next 2.5 hours, is going away, with very, very, very rare exception. And the rare exceptions are the tentpoles, the Marvels, or the gigantic Dune movies, or,
very
whatever.
Rare that you're going to get a Joker that everybody wanted to go see.
Very rare.
Very extremely rare. So yeah, it's an interesting time that we're in. I just wanted to sum this up too. I think one of the other long-term goals is, and something that we haven't talked about during this episode, is the idea of the original content that we're going to be also providing on our video channel on YouTube. One of the things that we're going to be doing is actually the things that me and Ritch have been talking about how to build your audience, those pillar videos that we've talked about.
Right.
We're going to be introducing a lot of that stuff too. So it's not going to only be just interviews that you're watching from people from the industry. We're also going to be creating original content that's going to be discussing all these topics and terms and how to write great songs and all the different, things about finding who your audience is and everything. We're going to go into much more detail with that. And some of the other things that are coming up in the future is that we're going to be live streaming too. We're going to be doing live streams coming up probably a few months after our launch, after this recording that you're hearing, where we're going to be going live once a week and talking with you guys, seeing what's happening with you guys, maybe even listening to some music, giving some critiques. We're also going to be having guests that are going to come on to those live streams.
Taking your questions.
Exactly, taking your questions. So we're really excited about the future and what we're planning to do with MUBU.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. I mean, it's going to be much more integrated. We want to get you guys involved. So there's a lot of great things coming up with the future of MUBU. Not only the podcast and the videos, but like Eric said, a lot more original content. We're also going to be having a news segment as well, a live segment, guests. So there's a lot of great stuff coming up. And we also want to hear from you. If there's things that you want to learn
Absolutely.
about, the things that you would like us to have on the show.
Questions that you want us to ask our guests. I mean, we're going to definitely be doing a lot of that, where we're going to be really asking for what you guys want to know. I mean, we obviously have a idea of what kind of things, but it's really important to us that you guys let us know on where your problem areas are, what you're struggling with. That's, I think, key in order for us to try to provide that content to you.
Exactly. And, most people start out with, where do I start? I mean, that's always the most common question. Like, where do I start? And like you always say, Eric, it starts with great songs.
Absolutely, Rich. Like our dear friend Don Grierson always says, it always starts with great songs. I don't know about you, Rich. I'm so excited about this launch. Are you ready, Rich?
I absolutely am. I'm very, very excited about it. Insiders, are you ready?
The MUBUTV Insider Podcast. New episodes each and every Tuesday. Listen on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts from. MUBUTV. Music, business, television.